Today, we have a very special birthday to announce. Born on this day in 1952, our birthday boy joined the intelligence service at the age of 23, moved on to counterintelligence at the Red Banner Institute, and worked undercover in New Zealand and in Dresden, Germany, running guns and spying for his government. When the Berlin Wall fell, he successfully smuggled government secrets out of Berlin and returned home, where he began working as an assassin for the government and a recruiter for intelligence services, rising to the rank of lieutenant colonel. In 1991, he resigned from counterintelligence, ostensibly, to begin a political career, and became one of the only people, in fact, to the best of my knowledge, the only person in history to serve two non-consecutive terms, both as president and as prime minister in any country. He saw unprecedented growth during his first term until his country was hit with sanctions over the annexation of Crimea. He sits the president of a country which is quickly being reviled as one of the worst countries and worst regimes on the planet, losing a war in Ukraine and under constant threat of assassination. Vladimir Vladimirov, well, you'd think I could do those names correctly. Vladimirovich Putin turns 70 today. I hope everyone here will join me in wishing Putin that his 70th year is a short one. This is Overtime. Jay Bratt, chief of counterintelligence and export control at the Justice Department, has informed Donald Trump's legal team that law enforcement believes that the former president is still in possession of classified government documents. The National Archives and Records Administration also confirms that a number of presidential records are still missing. The Justice Department says that they believe that he has these documents for a number of reasons, not the least of which is because they retrieved at least 48 folders and envelopes from Mar-a-Lago, which were marked classified, but were in fact empty, and the contents have not yet been retrieved. Mr. Barrett has demanded that the former president, return the remaining documents. Trump's legal team purportedly has split in two as to how to respond, with one faction suggesting that an independent forensic firm, be hired to search for all the remaining documents. Turns out Trump was not a fan of that idea and declined to go that route. A three-judge panel from the 11th Circuit Court has overruled the lower court decision, postponing the investigation until a special master could complete his review of the documents. Trump has appealed this decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. We will be discussing that in a little bit at the end. If I forget, somebody asked the question. We also learned that in his final days in office, the Trump administration took millions of paycheck-protected loans, which had been flagged for potential fraud, and wiped the flags. The Small Business Administration estimates that 2.7 million flags between December 2020 and January 21 were wiped. That is a 1-month period. And 99% of the special review flags, which were given to every loan over $2 million for separate investigatory purposes, were all wiped out of the $800 billion given out under the programmed flag loans. Accounted for roughly $190 billion, which is about 23% of the loans. Many of the loans went out to companies and or billionaires, including Republican fundraiser Joe Farrell and Kanye West. One of the flagged loans went to West Virginia Governor Jim Justice. That loan was flagged 8 8 times. There were also flags for businesses which apparently were not even qualified to get loans and had. Loans also went to Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Mike Kelly, and what's his name, the running man there? I've forgot. Gates. The U.S. Supreme Court is slated to hear a number of new cases in the term, which has now opened. My cup runneth over. A number of cases, all with the potential to reshape the United States of America. Moore versus Harper, which we've discussed, has the potential to give legislators unchecked power in districting. It is, in fact, a redistricting case. It is an appeal of a case where the district maps were ruled illegal. The argument here is that actually a judge can't rule them illegal because the strictest interpretation of the Constitution is that state legislatures and state legislators alone determine how local and federal elections are run within that state. If they decide on the strictest interpretation, this would mean that there would be no appeal to gerrymandered maps made by legislators. There would be no appeal to legislators who, if, for example, they said you must vote Republican, and they're going to throw out all the votes for a liberal judge. There is no appeal. It is literally, that's the interpretation. The argument is actually there is an appeal, of course. You just don't vote for those legislators next time around. Having said that, golly gee, who determines how I vote for my legislators? Want to guess? They're also looking at 303 Creative LLC versus Elenis, which is about whether or not some businesses may refuse to provide services to potential customers based on religious or other convictions. This is believed to also foretell what is going to happen to gay marriage. That is also tied loosely to this. If businesses can reject someone based on religious beliefs or any preference they have, the next question is why can't states decline marriage certificates and yada, yada, yada. So that's going to be a big one. In a Gallup poll released last week, 58% of Americans said they disapprove of the job the Supreme Court was doing. This is the highest rating since the year 2000 when Gallup first started asking the question. Chief Justice John Roberts took some exception to this and said, quote, "The court has always decided controversial cases and the decisions always have been subject to intense criticism, and that's entirely appropriate. But I don't understand the connection between opinions that people disagree with and the legitimacy of the court." Yeah. Johnny, let me explain something to you. It's not just the decisions, although, to be fair, that's part of it. It's that 3 of those justices lied to the U.S. Congress in order to get on your court. Nobody seems to really be interested or care about that, and since they've got lifetime appointments, there's nothing anybody can really do. One of your justices was the sole dissenting opinion on a case where he ostensibly tried to cover up and withhold evidence that his wife was possibly committing crimes against the U.S. government. And he refused to recuse himself then and refuses to recuse himself now on any of these cases going forward. He has also said that he wants to consider at least overturning 50 years of precedent in a number of cases, excepting one. The one that allowed him to marry his wife. Yeah, Johnny, that's why people are disagreeing with the legitimacy of the court. That's as far as you need to look. Think on that. The UN has passed a motion to appoint an independent expert to investigate human rights violations by Russia in the war in Ukraine. Nearly 50 countries together brought the motion before the Human Rights Council, including the United States, Ukraine, Japan. China was one of 6 nations to vote against the motion, as was Russia, and Russia has said that they will not cooperate with the investigation. Meanwhile, in yet another rebuke of Putin, the Nobel Prize has been awarded to Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian activists, including the Russian rights group Memorial and the Ukrainian Center for Civil Liberties. Both Belarus and Russia have chosen to ignore the fact that these awards have been given. And not to mention that one of the recipients, Ales Bialystsky, is in prison in Russia right now, and being the fourth person in actually is it Russia or Belarus? He's in prison, and he is the fourth person in history to receive the award while in jail. The International Monetary Fund, meanwhile, has approved $1.3 billion in emergency funding for Ukraine. Russia continues to complain about the United States and other Western countries arming Ukraine. However, in the nearly month-long counteroffensive, it's worth noting that fleeing Russian troops have, in their panic, neglected to bring a great deal of their equipment with them. Howitzers, tanks, mortars, ammunition. The Wall Street Journal is reporting now that nearly half of Ukrainian tanks are actually Russian, and that the single largest supplier of Ukrainian equipment is now Russia. Thank you. Iran has been using live rounds and killing more than 100 people in its crackdown against protesters. The U.S. State Department has now said that it will coordinate with its allies and partners on how to respond with this illegal crackdown, calling it, quote, state-sponsored violence against women. The protests started when a woman was taken by the morality police. We don't know exactly why. It appears to have something to do with her headscarf. Either she was not wearing one, or you could see too much out from under it. She was never seen alive again. The state has lied repeatedly about how and why she died, and several people have died since then, including a 16-year-old girl. She was found... her family was briefly allowed to identify the body. They weren't allowed to see it. The state has said that she did not die of violence. That has been contradicted by several witnesses having said that, and the parents have now been forced to say that they believe the state's version of events during live television on a hot mic. It can be the father can be heard being threatened to say that she had not died violently. The Biden administration is asking OPEC to increase, or has asked, I should say, OPEC to increase production in order to reduce the cost of fuel during this inflationary period. However, OPEC has decided to drastically cut back production, increasing the cost of gasoline as winter approaches, so that they may increase their own revenue. OPEC has historically given U.S. favorable discounts in oil, due in no small part to our support for the military support for the royal house of Saud. Biden, however, has been slightly more critical of Saudi Arabia than many of his predecessors. Trump. Sorry, that cough there. Wasn't Trump like holding hands with them and calling, we won't get into that. That's one of those, the trauma I would just rather forget. He's been very critical of Saudi Arabia, especially in light of their killing of Washington Post reporter Khashoggi. In response to their cutting back the oil, Biden has suggested maybe going to Venezuela. Venezuela does also have a government that we strongly object to, but probably less than the Royal House of Saud. He's also suggested that he would support NOPEC, the bill which passed the Senate, actually, passed the Senate Judiciary Committee 17-4. Now, this bill has come up several times in the last, I think it's 20 years. It's never really gotten very far. Now, OPEC is a monopoly, and until now, it's been suggested that OPEC and its member nations are immune to lawsuit in the U.S. This bill would revoke their sovereign immunity, allow them to be challenged as a monopoly, and allow the U.S. Attorney General to sue Saudi Arabia in federal court. This is not the first time, as I said before, that the bill has passed, but it's usually been opposed actually by American oil companies on the grounds that it would. Oh, sorry. Hold on. I think I may have that. Yes. Okay. It's been opposed. Well, it's been opposed by a number of. It's been opposed by the Saudis strongly, who said that they would retaliate. It's been opposed by American energy companies. Let's see. But the Clearview Energy Partners, a nonpartisan group, says that they believe now that the bill would likely pass the 60 votes needed in the Senate, and the Biden administration has suggested that he would not veto the bill. People have been concerned, however, that a number of other countries would follow suit against the United States. And Saudi Arabia has threatened to undermine the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency of the world by refusing to sell any oil in the dollar to any nation in the world. Federal agents have said, as we said last night, that they have enough evidence to charge Hunter Biden with tax fraud and lying to agents. And the Justice Department is weighing if and when they will charge the president's son. It does take years sometimes to investigate these things, but it looks like they believe that there's enough evidence now to drop charges. Typically, the Justice Department has an unwritten rule that says that they don't indict politicians within 60 days of an election, and we are within 60 days. However, of course, Hunter Biden is not a politician. He's the son of one. So nobody really knows. Chris Clark, who is a lawyer for Hunter Biden, has said, quote, "It's a federal felony for a federal agent." I don't think he needed to use the word federal twice in the same sentence, but okay. "To leak information about a grand jury investigation such as this one. Any agent you cite as a source in your article apparently has committed such a felony. We expect the Department of Justice will diligently investigate and prosecute such bad actors." Meanwhile, President Biden has pardoned every American of all prior federal offenses for the possession of marijuana. Quote, "No one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana, said Biden. Quote, "Sending people to jail for possessing marijuana has upended too many lives for conduct that is legal in many states." That's before you address the clear racial disparities around prosecution and conviction. There are thousands of people who have prior federal convictions for marijuana possession who may be denied employment, housing, or educational opportunities as a result. Today, we begin to right these wrongs. He's directed the Secretary of Health and Human Services, as well as the Justice Department, to reevaluate how the drug is classified. Under federal law, right now, it is Schedule 1, tantamount to heroin. And he has suggested that perhaps the drug is not quite so bad. President Biden also caught a number of his senior advisors off guard yesterday when he gave a blunt assessment of the situation in Ukraine, saying that the prospect of nuclear war is today higher than it's ever been in the last 60 years. Biden administration officials were quick to point out that there is no new intelligence, no new shift in U.S. doctrine, which would prompt him to say that, and reminded people that Joe Biden does not necessarily speak for the Biden administration. All right, and that is the rundown for today. So, we've had a couple of questions. All of this you can find on our Discord. Titan has dropped the link several times. I hope you will come join us and see the discussions that we are having on this and other topics. We are obviously keeping an eye. I think the biggest thing we're watching for is any signs of a nuclear deployment in Ukraine so far. The evidence, such as I've seen, is that Putin has not made any moves towards moving weapons, a tactical nuclear device down there. The U.S. government is keeping an eye on that, and that so far seems to be the case. Nobody's quite sure what's going to happen. We do know that I think it was, quote, today, which, given that Russia's off by one day, I'm not sure. It was in the presidential daily briefing today that senior officials in Putin's administration had a frank chat with him regarding their views on how the war in Ukraine is going, and that one person in particular who was named in the daily briefing, but we don't know who it is, seems to have placed the blame squarely at Putin's feet, and that they're having that discussion so frankly with him, and that the U.S. intelligence is able to get it so rapidly suggests that his administration is very much nearing an end. So that's obviously the hope. We're going to keep an eye on all of that. One of the questions that had come up on the Discord, and I answered it there, but I'll bring it up again, is on the Supreme Court. Trump has appealed his the decision on the special master to the Supreme Court. I don't know what really he gains by them taking this. By the time they get this, and by the time they rule on this, which is months, it's too late for him to do what he's trying to do, which is to slow down the investigation. They'll have gone through all the documents by then, so it's really a moot point. I kind of suspect that there's a decent chance that the court will take it anyway. The only reason I think the court would take it would actually be to deny it. Take it, look at it, and then say, nope. The 11th Circuit got it right, and throw it back in his face. Why would they do that? Well, I agree that they've had some terrible decisions, but actually they've ruled against Trump repeatedly, and they seem to have no particular loyalty towards him. So I don't see any evidence that they would vote for him in this particular case. I don't see any reason why they would disagree with the 11th Circuit. The issues that they have are mostly ideological and really far-right conservative, bordering on really religious. This doesn't, the Trump case doesn't speak to any of those, but Roberts and et al. Are very well aware of the political or the views of the American public on their last term, and this gives them a chance to burnish their credentials with a part of the public that is extraordinarily pissed at them. So if they can shut down Trump, it's an opportunity for them to burnish their credentials with people who are really pissed at them right now. So in general, the Supreme Court isn't supposed to do that. They tell you that they don't do that kind of thing. They do it, but they do usually keep it reasonably limited. I would not be surprised if this is an example of that. If they take it, I would not see that as a sign that they're going to overturn the 11th Circuit. They have no particular love for, they don't hate him, but they got no love for Trump, and they got no real loyalty to him. So my view is that appeal isn't going anywhere. So that was, I think, the only one I wanted to hit. I don't know if there are any other questions, so I'm going to quickly check the live chat. Like I said, we're constantly discussing these things on the Discord, so I hope you'll come by and check it out. And let's see, don't let, yeah, at no time does Joe Biden speak for the Biden administration. I think that's their policy. And I will be honest, and I don't think I've ever voiced this, which is I really like Joe Biden. I like Joe Biden a lot. I really like the guy, which is, I think, why I haven't been too critical. But the reality is it looks to me as if he's fading mentally. And listen, I've said that about Trump. So I'm an equal opportunity. I call him like I see him. And he's gone off and said some things that make it look like he's really running off script. Now, it's possible that's an act. And it's possible he knows exactly what he's doing when he does it. And he knows that his administration is going to come up and say, no, we didn't mean that. But it lets him, get in some digs when he wants to against people that he wants to. And so all that's entirely possible. I don't think it's the most likely scenario. Or it's not a remote shot, but it's not the most likely. The most likely is he's losing the ability to censor himself, and that's a problem for a president. Admittedly, Trump managed to get away with it without causing World War III, but I don't ever want to go through a Trump presidency again. So it's a concern. I like the guy a lot, and I think he's really got people's best interest at heart, and he's a genuine leader. But it there's a difference between where we would have been if he was in office 4 years ago than today. But anyways, let's see. So anything else? Yeah. All right. Well, so I think that just about covers it. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And as I said, we're keeping an eye on. There's a lot going on. We're trying to learn more and get more into Saudi Arabia. Sorry, not Saudi Arabia, Iran. That is really not being covered. And I think there's at least a 50-50 that we're going to see a regime change in Iran start in earnest within the next month. We have the same conditions that caused the last one. We discussed that with Commander McMillan last night. The conditions are very similar. The people involved are the same people under the same kinds of issues. He did point out that the protesters don't have, that we're aware of, a leader. It's really hard to get any information out of there, and that's a little unusual, even for Iran. So we're going to keep an eye on that. We're keeping an eye on, obviously, Ukraine, which is what I think is concerning everybody the most, and certainly the Supreme Court. And there's something about... Of course, Trump still has more classified documents. Really, really. I mean, at this point, they need to just go in, seize everything, go through every property he's got. And I hate to say it, but they have to dig up Ivana. They have to dig up Ivana because there was something buried. She was, yeah. I can't even believe I have to suggest that. But yeah, it's got to be done at this point. So we'll say thank you all for joining us, and we will see you guys next week. Have a good weekend, all.